This conference will now be recorded.
Great. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the November 12th meeting of the South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners. This is a budget workshop meeting. This budget workshop meeting is focused around our general fund this evening. And I just ask that before we get things started, Renee, would you be so kind as to do a roll call vote, please?
Sure.
Or not vote, roll call, just roll call, no vote, just a roll call.
Sure. Commissioner Walk,
Here.
Commissioner Mobilio,
Here.
Commissioner Kelly. I see her. I think she said here she's on mute. Commissioner Sutton
Here.
and Commissioner Morgan.
Here. All right, the gang's all here. I just asked before we get things started this evening if we could all please rise and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. I'd like to note that all public sessions of the South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners are electronically recorded, filed, and posted on board docs for the public's access. And again, this evening, we're going to start things off with our presentation of our general fund. I will hand things off to Renee to get things started and right off to Scott.
All righty, thank you. Obviously, 2020 has been quite a challenging year for us. Something that I don't think any of us have experienced before, and especially, globally, nothing people have really experienced. With that being said, at the beginning of the pandemic, we did a great job. Our staff has done an incredible job of holding in expenses during this time period. And so, as we've walked through, this budget is a combination of work from all of our department heads based on their operating expenses on a daily basis, and including their capital expenses for 2021. Overall, we have held our expenses. Our health insurance has actually taken a minor decrease overall. Our numbers may have changed in employees or an election, but overall, our premium has not changed. Pension, we saw a slight decrease in pension, and that's really attributable to wages and also people who are on the DB plan actively retiring and new members coming into the DC plan, which is a cost saving to the pension benefits across the board. So with that being said, again, our expenses are pretty similar to last year. I will let Scott jump in, and we are going to go in a little different order tonight because Randy is in some limited area with some limited service. So we're going to jump ahead. I'll let Scott introduce, but we're going to jump ahead and go to Parks and Rec and Public Works first, and then we'll work our way back to the other departments.
Thank you, Renee. Up first tonight, this is going to be this is the biggest portion of the township's budget, as we're probably all aware. So this one, we're going to have a lot. There's going to be a lot of details that are going to be thrown at everybody. So just bear with me as we get through this together. And so it's a lot for me, and I'm sure it's going to be a lot for everybody as well. So with that being said, I will bring up on my screen just the portions of your packet that you'll be able to see. I didn't put page numbers on them, and I apologize for that. But if you go to around the 9th page, actually no, we'll go straight to the capital portion. If you go to the second to the last page in your packet, we'll start with this, and we'll discuss. Randy will lead us through Public Works and Parks and Recreation.
That would be page 15.
15, yes, yep. Oh yeah, it's in a PDF. You've got page numbers.
Hey, Scott, I'm gonna let Herb tackle the capital for public works, especially the
Okay.
paving and things like that.
Sounds good.
And Mike's gonna talk about Parks and Rec, and then I'll jump in if there's any questions about those capital projects as well.
For sure.
Okay. Herb, you out there, buddy?
Yes, Scott, can you share your screen? I didn't
Oh
get
yeah,
it.
sorry, Herb.
Out.
Thanks,
Yep.
Scott. Appreciate it.
For sure. There we go. There's my screen.
Oh boy.
You might need to make that not 52 unless everybody here has super great eyesight because it's like scary
Herb.
small.
Can you see
Yeah,
that?
on the right side of everybody's screen, you should have a plus and minus sign. If you hit the plus sign a few times, it'll zoom in for you too. That
Awesome,
might help
thank
you.
Yep.
All right. So to start in the capital for Public Works, we have some paving from the Clifford Park Annex area. That'll be up there. Woodlawn Manor area is also there. Scott has the totals on the right. The Clifford Park Annex is $3,563, and the Woodlawn Manor area is $800,090 and $392. And then for the traffic markings, which is the paint, is 2,000, and the thermoplastic for all the areas would be 4,000. The Kubota skid steer, that was actually, it won't be a Kubota. We've been working on this quote for a hard and long time. It will actually be John Deere now. They have come back with a lower price than Kubota. That'll come out of, again, 4 budgets. So there will be 28,000 out of this one. And that will also be split across refuse for 20,000, water for 20,000, and sewer for 20,000. And then the bucket truck, which is split 3 ways, for 45,000 across 3, which is Public Works for 45, water for 45,000, and sewer for 45,000. And then a Ford Explorer for 29,000.
Hey Herb, is the Ford Explorer just a fleet vehicle for public works, or is that for something specific?
What it's going to be used for is when we have snow right now, all our trucks are on the road, and we only have one other 4-wheel drive vehicle. So when the snow is significant, we have to ride together, where if we can break up, we would be able to split into different parts of the township to see where we need to get more help to make sure the roads are open.
Great, thank you.
Are there any more questions about the Public Works capital? If not, we can jump over to Parks and Rec.
I just had one on the amounts for the paving. How are those calculated? Is that just the formula, or do we have bids that we're using?
No,
co-source?
we don't have bids at this time, Diane. We have to come to the board with to ask to advertise and get the bids. What we do is we look at the state contract and see what the price range is roughly. And last year we used $15. So this year we went to $17, did it by the square yard.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up, maybe this is a question for Renee or Scott. Can you help me understand, do we use any liquid fuels money to take care of our paving?
Well, that's always an option. We did move one of these projects, not that are listed here, but after we did liquid fuels, we decided to move one over to liquid fuels, and that budget will come back again next Tuesday. But yes, we are going to move one of the paving jobs over to liquid fuels. I believe it was about $202,000, Herb, if I'm correct.
It's $220,354.
So yes, we do use some for liquid fuels.
And just curious, do we have a general plan for the township? I know liquid fuels, we do get a set amount per year. I think this year we're looking at next year to get 750 or 800,000. Is that something that we take a certain percentage and begin working on our roads?
Well, it just depends. Herb has been working on an overall road plan for the township based on some criteria. But again, it depends on the other avenues that we have liquid fuels for. And, looking at, with that project in there, liquid fuels will have about a $20,000 cash carry forward into next year. And then again, we re-examine next year. Liquid fuels on an annual basis based on our allocation from the state.
And I remember during one of our finance meetings in the spring, it was mentioned that we were doing a study of our roads with Keystone Engineering to get kind of a sense of where we are as a township, where the needs are, and what we would be looking at to plan that moving forward. Is that something that's in process still?
Yeah, Herb has taken a look at that. Herb stepped back in based on the project leader at Keystone Engineering, but Herb has been working on that based on a criteria. I mean, Herb, I don't know if you have any more information on that at this point.
As of right now, Diane, no, I'm not doing nothing with Keystone. I am doing it in-house myself, going out, checking the roads, seeing if they need full reconstruction, a mill and overlay, to evaluate the roads myself to try to help keep the costs down so we don't have to outsource that. I do have a map going that will be color coded. It should be completed shortly with all the roads through the township of how I would like to tackle them.
And keep in mind, Herb takes into account like the projects that are also gone in conjunction with other areas, whether it be UGI gas line installations or PennDOT projects, to make sure that we're not doing a project and then somebody's coming in behind us and tearing up any paving that we just did.
Yes, I actually just spoke with UGI and I have their 5-year outlook for the township.
Great, thank you.
We charge them a pretty substantial fee if they have to rip up a road, correct?
We have a ordinance about our roads that if they have so many cuts and so many feet, if they cross the center line, it's all spelled out in the ordinance exactly what they would have to do, Scott.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Herb, I remember in years gone by, there was a group that used to get together, like PPL and some other of the utility groups would all get together to talk about projected plans. Are you guys still doing that? Are you still part of that group?
Yes, we are in that group. This year they have had none though due to COVID. So I'm hoping next year we do get back to doing that.
Yep, I just knew that was a great resource. So I just wanted to make sure we were still involved in it. That's great. Thank you.
Yep, and I am in talks with North Whitehall also, where we have some roads that join up to their roads to see what their plans are to when they might want to do their roads, to see if we could get any cost sharing between both townships to get both sides of the road done at one time.
Excellent. I know we did that with not too long ago on Trexler Boulevard with the city of Allentown. Yeah, that's great when we can kind of do a cooperative effort with a neighboring community to make sure that we're doing the roads at the same time. It's probably a definite cost savings across the board. So that's great to hear. Thank you.
And also, just so everybody knows too about the Clifford Park Annex, that's the one. Sorry, Clifford Park is the one on liquid fuels. Clifford Park Annex and the Woodlawn Manor paving. These were expenses that we originally had budgeted for last year in last year's budget, and due to COVID-19, we decided to postpone these. So that's the main kind of, yeah, you just need to know that.
Yeah, I believe, weren't we actually going to take a loan out to take care of all the paving in this year, and then we decided not to because of
Correct.
COVID. There was quite a few road projects on tap.
Correct.
And
Yes.
just so everyone knows, we are looking at other ways to try to bring these costs down. There's other ways we can do it. We have to make sure we have the right manpower and everything to accomplish it. We can just put out a bid for just milling like we did this year, and the township ourselves with the Public Works Department would do the paving also. So there's other ways we can structure this to try to help out with the cost of all this.
And Herb, you know, and that's fantastic. I think that's great that you're looking at all those ways. But I think, you know, we years ago, we learned our lesson the hard way, and I'm sure you're not going to do this. I forget what it was called. Renee, help me out. What was that?
Now, tar and stone, or chip and oil, chip and oil.
Yeah, you're talking about oil and chip or Nova Seal. That stuff does not work.
We'll never do that again.
We'll never do
I'm
that
not
again.
a fan of that.
Yeah, we thought we were we thought we were doing the right thing, and it was a cost savings, and turned around and really did bite us in the butt. So that was you know, a learning experience, and so I appreciate that you're always looking at ways to do it more efficient and you know, more economic, but always keeping in mind that, you know, we want to ensure the quality, which I'm sure you do. So I just bring that up.
Next year, a lot of those roads are on for the 2022 paving project because they're just deteriorating so bad.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Thank you, Herb. Any other questions for Herb on the roads for consideration, or any of the other public works capital expenses? Okay, Scott.
Next up, we have, I believe it's Mike Cookitz, who is going to explain some Parks and Rec expenses and revenues.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Put down how Scott has them in order here. Starting with Jordan Creek Greenway. As you know, we are looking to get designed and permitted from Ware Mill Road out to Cedar Crest Boulevard. It's a two-phase project, one being Ware Mill Road through Lap Road, and then Lap Road to Cedar Crest Boulevard. The total project cost for this is $300,000. We did receive 90% of that grant this year, and match that at $135,000. So what we're seeing here for next year is the additional $15,000 that we'll get once we close out the grant, as well as the $15,000 match that we will need. Solar Ridge Master Plan. You can see we got a grant there for $19,700. That RFP is out and is due at the end of this month, actually. So we are off and running with that, and that will be completed next year. The Cover Bridge Park Playground restroom renovation. This year we were able to get the pad in place and all the rough plumbing, but we still do need the restroom structure. As you know, it's just porta potties down there, and that really comes into play with our pavilion rentals and just overall park experience, all the residents down there. So we are looking to reconstruct that bathroom that is in Cover Bridge Park. We have the flood mitigation feasibility study. This is a DCAD grant. It's a $30,000 grant. Our match is only 15% or $4,500. So the total expense there shows $34,500, but it's really only $4,500 is our match for that one. The Vistas Park improvements, we have received the $200,000 from DCNR, and we have DCAD grant out. We're hoping to hear maybe this month, maybe next month on another $250,000 grant for that. So this one's kind of dependent upon grant funding. If we do receive the DCAD grant and we can be off and running, we would need some funding for the soft cost to get all of the design and permitting to ready to be shovel ready. So that's what that line item is. And last but not least, Jacoby Park playground improvements. We have a lot of pocket parks. We have, I believe it's about 15 pocket parks, and they were all done around the same time period. And a lot of the equipment is old, faded, rusting, just not very aesthetically pleasing anymore. So I know our plan is to hopefully complete a smaller pocket park, to do one a year. And Jacoby Park is next on the list for that.
So the way,
go ahead, Scott.
The way that grant expenses are an odd thing with the rules of accounting, because we can only account for grant revenues in the same period in which we expend the funds. But we can only account for grant revenues if the money has been received and if there are any stipulations with which have been satisfied that have to do with the grant as well. So where the breakdown of the revenues for the Jordan Greenway project, last year we had listed, in that budget, we had listed both parts of the 150,000. And so originally, that 300,000 would have been budgeted and would have been accounted for in that period. But due to the fact that there was 15%, I think it's like 15% left over, or 5% left over from the total, that 30,000 that is left over, of which we're going to get another 15,000 total, 7,500 from each section. We can't expense that. We can't put that as an expense on our books until that current period. So that's why that $30,000 shows up in our budget here for that. So like some of the other grants are that way as well. So if you notice on page, I'll scroll back to page 14, that shows the revenue breakdown for the grants. And this is showing the money that will come in 2021, the cash that will hit our books for these grants. So
yeah, I can chime back in there. I mean, this just goes along with everything I just said. So we are still expecting the 15,000 in grant funding towards the Jordan Creek Greenway, 19,700 from Kohler Ridge. The Vistas Park improvements, again, that is, we have 200 secured. We're looking hopefully back from DCD with a favorable grant, which would bring that to 450. The flood mitigation study, we have the 30,000. And the playground at Cover Bridge Park, all DCNR grants, they always hold 10%. So we aren't complete with that project just yet. We are very close, but more than likely it's going to be next year by the time we have DCNR representatives come out, look at the project, and put their stamp of approval on it. So that's why you see the additional, the last 10% there, the $25,000 in next year's budget.
So minus the grant funding, because some of the grant expenses that we show below are as a result of the grant funding. Minus the grant funding, the Parks and Rec budget, like stuff that's not funded by grants, is about $339,000, just as an FYI.
And the final thing, oh, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead, Mike. I'll comment.
I was just going to say, the final thing there, the open space funds, we are working with a local resident and business owner who would like to give back to the township here and possibly construct a pavilion / amphitheater type structure on the east side of Cover Bridge Park, kind of down where we hold our concerts currently. So what you'll see there is an additional $7,500. If it does happen, then that money will help to get the lighting and landscaping and final touches for that new pavilion and amphitheater down in that end of the park.
Awesome. That Mike, would that fit right in with the park master plan as well, correct?
Absolutely, yep.
Awesome. That's great. Well, I just have, one comment on parks. We've seen the amount of interest and desire for our park systems grow even more since COVID. People are looking for places to go and social distance and be outside. So this is fantastic.
That is irritating, and I don't want to take this is they actually.
We got somebody's on. Somebody's on. Okay. So that would be my comment. I think it's great. I'm glad to see the amount of grant opportunities we have that are keeping these projects going. So great job, Mike.
I had a question, Mike, under the grant revenue, or maybe Scott, you might know this, for the vistas, what is the percent match? There wasn't anything noted there on that page.
No, actually, what we're hopeful that we're going to be able to do with that project is match the DCNR grant to the DCED grant, and not exhaust any of our funds for construction.
And when you say hopeful, is that up to where the money is coming from, which agency gives it to us, or how does that get worked out?
By hopeful, I just mean hopefully we get the favorable DCED grant. These two grants can match each other.
Okay, so if they were to match each other, then it would just be the 80,000 in the capital budget.
Correct.
And where is, I just didn't see it. Where do we have the open space account here? What page is that on?
Oh, that's on the same page there. It looks like it's just kind of tucked under the property improvement expenses there. It's the open space funds.
I think she's actually looking for the budget itself.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think Scott was
I have
preparing,
nothing in the budget for the current year.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Scott's preparing that for Tuesday.
Okay. And my understanding of open space funds is that can be used for maintenance of current parks as well. So just as a general question, for something like upgrading the Jacoby Park and the vistas improvements and whatnot, is there a reason why those are coming out of taxpayer funds and not open space funds?
Sure. I mean, our thought there, and again, it's for the board to ultimately decide, but I know we like to try to build up the open space funds and keep a healthy balance in there so that if there are any properties that become available in the township or anything that, comes up that could be a great addition to our park system, then we have the funding available to pursue those.
Yeah, I'll chime in on that, Diane. That absolutely was a discussion that was talked about at length in previous budget meetings to have a healthy open space budget to do exactly what Mike had said. We found ourselves in situations where if we're looking to buy some open space that becomes available within the township, as referenced, we would be in a position to be able to do that. Otherwise, we wouldn't. So that's why that fund is the way it is.
Okay, I'm just curious, just because we're in COVID and we are looking at things, I think, a little bit differently this year, funding wise and revenue wise, and certainly next year, we don't know yet. I know we use township funds, if I'm correct, to purchase the Cola Ridge, and that was 383,000. So just from a financial standpoint, if we've got, what is our open space fund balance right now?
I think it's about $350,000.
Correct. It's in that ballpark.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what other board members feel about this, but I would certainly like to entertain moving some of these to that fund so that it's not such a hit on our taxpayers right now.
I'd like to go through the rest of the budget before making a decision on a shift on that fund. That would be my position.
I just have a question because I didn't quite follow the last 5 minutes. Where is the open space fund? Is it in this budget or not? Renee made a quick comment that someone would present something Tuesday, although it seems to be
It's
relevant
just
to this.
not a fund, it's a bank account with a balance.
Yes, it's a bank account, Mike. So the budget that you vote on is not, you know, if you think about the business world and you think about financial statements, we're not voting on balance sheet. We're voting on income statement. So revenues and expenses are what's brought forward, not assets and liabilities. So the open space fund is an asset account, and that's a cash bank account. So I chose not to reflect that on this page because it's not an expense. Now, if we choose to, you know, that's at the board's discretion. You know, when you have that discussion about the open space funds at that time, then I can put an expense up on here. But that's why I chose not to put an expense on here.
The other option is knowing that it's a $350,000 balance. After you see the rest of the general fund tonight, if you choose as a board to just tell us to take something off of this, knowing that it's 350, if you choose to take something off of this, it could be reflected and brought back next Tuesday and you would see the balance.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's difficult to look at capital expenses when I actually have absolutely no idea where we are revenue-wise or overall budget. So a little bit difficult to make that type of decision right now.
For sure. I think
Yeah,
lastly, oh, Mike, did you have something? Were you about to say something?
Yeah, as a general point, I concur with Diane. I mean, it's a very overarching point. I appreciate you're going through the budget and you know, from your standpoint, the way you prepared it in a very natural manner. But honestly, I mean, overall, we'll have to arrive at a point where we either agree or disagree the budget. We do need to know the overall revenue
Well,
in
that's what you're
order.
going to see. I think if you, the presentation earlier tonight, we jumped to the capital for Randy to start because he's not, he wasn't supposed to be available tonight. So we jumped to the capital. You're going to see the rest of the general fund and the revenues momentarily. And that's why I think Tori indicated that she would wait till the end of this presentation to discuss that.
Yeah,
I think,
okay.
Mike,
Thank
once you
you.
see the rest of the information, it will come together. I understand your confusion, but I think it's only because we had to kind of go out of order a little bit. You know, again, let's hear it out and then ask the questions once we've had the full presentation. I think that would be the easiest way to go.
Okay. All right, that's good. So I just have one more question here, if not for the budget. So a little while ago, the park master plan was mentioned. It came up like 2 or 3 BOC meetings ago. The point was made, hey, it would be great to see the park master plan. And I think when it came up at the BOC meeting, it was suggested that Mike would present something, you know, prior to the budget. In any event, I don't think you're going into it tonight, but it would be great to have a presentation on the park master plan for the BOC and the public, which is what we said a couple of BOC meetings ago.
Mike, it's Randy. Can you guys hear me okay?
Okay, Randy.
Okay, so what we've proposed in the operating budget, which I believe we're going to get to here shortly for Parks and Rec and Public Works, but in the Parks and Rec budget, the operating budget, we do have money proposed in the professional service line item to update our parks and recreation open space plan. So you will see that when we get there, and that's something that Mike and I have discussed now, for quite some time. It's been since 2009 since that's been updated, so it is time to look at that. It also gives the board the opportunity to put their insight in for the parks plan and what the future of our park system is going to look like, as well as the open space fee that gets charged back to developers. So that's another important part to that plan, something that it would look at, and then we can assess that to see if it's on target or if it needs to be raised. And then most importantly, it really gives the public an opportunity to put their voice about what they would like to see in our park system. What are some amenities they'd love to see? What do they love right now? Where we can do better? Should we be acquiring more property, a rec center, a dog park, ice skating? I don't know. All that stuff would come out though during that public planning process. So you'll see that in our operating budget here under professional services.
Okay, thank you, Randy.
And
Got it.
just to piggyback on that, while we are talking about it, we are proposing to do just an update to the plan. So the current plan that the township has was done in 2009, which doesn't seem all that long ago, but in all honesty, you should have these updated every 10 years for obvious reasons. I mean, things change, interests change. But I was pleasantly surprised when I started working for the township and dove into the master plan here that, they really did do their due diligence with getting resident feedback. We had over 20% of the households in the township respond to this, and they listed the hiking and biking and trails as the #1 priority for the township, and it goes down from there. And I can see that's why a lot of these projects have been put into place, and we're continuing to work on things like the Jordan Creek Greenway. So that being said, even one of the consultants for the Cola Ridge RFP reached out and asked if Cola Ridge was in the master plan, and obviously that wasn't even a thought back then. So it is time to update that plan. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. I think there's a lot of good information in this plan. I just think it needs to be updated.
Okay. So Mike.
Yes.
I've been meaning to say this for a few meetings. I mean, you've come on board, it's about 2+ years ago?
No, it's a year and 5 months.
Okay. Any event, you've obviously dug in. You're doing a great job. So we all appreciate everything you're doing, and not just this, but the broader range of your responsibilities.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's been the most interesting first year of a job I've ever had. I can tell you that with COVID, and it's been a very interesting first year.
All right, Scott.
Yes. So I think we'll just get in. I'll start showing the expenses for the public works and the parks and recreations that we see them, and then we'll look at a holistic approach to the entire budget. So once again, don't be afraid by the details yet. We'll get there on the final amounts, but I'll let Randy go first on the parks and rec portion, or sorry, on the public works portion. And he's gonna have highlights. So Randy had some of the responsibilities of some of these numbers, and then we had other people working on other numbers as well. And so you're gonna hear from him, you're gonna hear from me, and you'll have Renee's input, and you'll have maybe Herb's input as well on various different things. So it's not all one person that does the budget. It's not all one person that works on this, but we've all pitched in, and so this is where we're at. And so, Randy, do you want to just highlight the things that you would like to highlight, and then if there's I'll just walk down through the budget and look at major changes, and then if there's questions, we can address those as we go.
Sure, I don't mind doing that. If we're going to start from the top, though, Renee's probably best to talk about the wages and salaries and those sorts of things. And then when we get more into the operations of it, I can certainly jump in and
for sure.
So the way this is broken down with wages, you will see, it's hard to see on the screen. I guess on your papers, it may be easier. You will see that there's two sets of wages for Public Works. Public Works are broken down into administrative wages and also union wages. So that's why you see two line items for wages. Also, further down under Public Works, the union's portion of health insurance and FICA taxes are all listed separately under Public Works. Later, when we get over to the admin side, you will see all non-union employees are clustered into an admin group. So your admin Public Works employees and the rest of the non-union people are all into the admin group. So that's why you see two different sets of the same types of object codes for Public Works. You will see the union, and then you will see administrative, which are non-union workers. You'll notice that we do not specifically budget line item numbers under sick pay or under holiday or under PTO. That's because we calculate the entire year's earnings under wages. Those are offsetting expenses. So when we look at them holistically and you get monthly financials, they're totaled in whole, not just wages. So again, those administratively, contractually, obviously there are different pay rates and pay increases considered. We're under a contract negotiations at this time, so those are under consideration in Public Works. Administratively, this year we budgeted a 2% increase for non-union employees. So I mean, that's it on the wages. It's pretty straightforward in that you know, attendance incentive and that type of thing go to, that's an annual incentive for use of no use of sick time or a partial use of sick time. Other than that, I think they're pretty self-explanatory on the actual pay line items.
Scott, where would you like me to start? Do you want me to kind of start up at the, license reimbursement or?
I think Randy, you could start around there.
Okay. So I'm gonna go a little quick. If I go too fast for you guys, just let me know. You're gonna see there's not a lot of changes in a lot of these accounts, but I will stop and explain any decreases or significant increases, anything like that. So license reimbursement, we kept the same this year at $1,000. Meals and foods, we kept the same this year at $500. That's typically something that comes up when snowstorm, things like that. Fuels, we've kept at 185,000. That's actually for the entire fleet, not just Public Works, but also police and fire, I believe. Uniforms and clothing, we took this down by $3,000, and the reason we did that this year, trying to save money wherever we can, obviously, but we did purchase a lot of updated uniforms, coveralls, those sort of things for the guys this year, which would last much longer than 1 year anyway. So we were able to take a look at that and bring that down a few $1,000s to help save some money. General government materials, we've kept that the same. We're at 300,000, and we feel pretty strong about that. We were a little bit lower this year because I think just being outside of the campus building and at Roma actually saved some costs there. But more of the things outside of the campus, this would include things like our pesticides, herbicides, topsoil, fertilizer for, grass seed, things like that, blacktop stone, for our job sites, those sorts of things. The parts we did increase by $5,000, and that's because there is a percentage increase on all parts nationwide. So we do anticipate that budget to go up a little bit this year. Small tools and minor equipment. Can you scroll down, Scott?
Yep.
Thank you. We did come in at $18,700 for this line item. Sorry, I'm trying to follow along on my sheet here too. And this includes things like our hand tools, replacement radios, power tools, chainsaws, leaf blowers, things that come up throughout the year that we need to replace. But we did take off about $9,000 there, and we think we'll be okay in 2021. Engineering services, we like to keep about $10,000 in there for things that come up. So we've kept that the same this year. PA one call, this is for our one calls, obviously, and our PUC compliance, about $12,000 in there. And we're holding that line item strong as well. No increase or decrease there. Travel, we did take down by about $500. We went from 1,000 last year to 500 this year. And that's because of COVID. Quite frankly, I don't think we're going to be traveling that much to any sort of seminars or conferences, anything like that. But if something does come up towards the end of the year, and we're able to do something like that, we would have money to do that. Advertising and printing, we took down about $250. Maintenance, service, and repairs, we took down about $2,500. That's for our garage software, our scanner, and then some miscellaneous repairs that come up throughout the year as well. Township building utilities kept the same at $2,000. Rentals, we actually took down $5,000, guys. I think that's because of the if the bucket truck does get approved, that's going to save us significantly there. So we're able to bring that down. Do subscriptions and books, staying at $1,000 across the board. Laundry room cleaning, or laundry and uniform cleaning, also staying at $17,000 here for next year. We've kept our contracted services the same at $225,500, and those are for things like our janitorial services, pest control, car washes, our first aid supplies, generator service, septic tanks that we have throughout the township, our grass cutting contract, those sorts of things that we do contract out. Contracted IT networking, we have 0 in there last year, 0 this year. Continuing ed, we did take down slightly. We do have some job training coming up for some of our public works staff this year, so we did keep $7,500 in there, but took it down from $11,000 last year. General government expense kept at $2,500. Major machinery and equipment, we did not budget anything in this line item this year. We did budget for a forklift last year at $17,000, but we were actually able to shift some things around at our parks maintenance building and the main garage, and we pulled that from the budget. So we're not proposing any major machinery or equipment out of this line item for next year. So you'll see a $0 proposal there, down from $17,000 last year. Tires, Herb's been doing a great job of stockpiling tires this year, so we're able to take that down $5,000 for next year, which is good. So we've got a pretty good stockpile and inventory on tires right now, and we feel 30,000 will cover us in 2021. Traffic signal maintenance staying at 35,000. Storm sewer management, we reduced it from 105,000 down to 65,000. Some of the fence repairs that are required for these basins we're going to do in-house. This is also for our outfall testing and some educational materials, street sweeping, disposal, things like that. Standby and on-call duty kept at 14,000 this year as well, and overtime we kept at 115,000. We've been keeping a very close eye on that, and the warmer winter that we have, the less we have to spend on overtime. So we're sitting good going into the winter season this year, and obviously we don't know what's on the horizon. So this is a line item we felt pretty strong about keeping the same moving into next year. I think I got all the operating there, Scott.
Sounds good.
I apologize.
And you jump back
Right.
for the actual union. Scott, if you move down or to the next page, I'm not sure which.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So there again, that's where, you see them twice. That again, the first top was the administrative staff that are non-union. The bottom half goes to the union.
How many administrative staff do we have?
Not in the, well, in Public Works, we have 2 administrative staff. Across the board, we have about 30 non-union.
I think it's 29 to be specific.
Thank you.
I don't know the other numbers, but yeah.
So looking at this, Scott, if I'm reading this right, it looks like we came in about $200,000 less than last year.
Correct, in terms of operating expenses for Public Works.
Right.
Yep.
Yep. So when we said we really took a hard look at it this year, we did. Herb and I have been working on this, and Mike Goliath for quite some time, and we were able to have some tough discussions about things that we'd be able to go without next year, and try to get into a lesser number than we were last year. So pretty confident with our number here, and happy that we're about $200,000 under our last year's bottom line.
Well, thank you, Randy.
No problem. Any questions for Herb or I with operating Public Works?
I just had a question. Our end of September report said that Public Works salaries were up 140,000. I thought you just said oh man, I misunderstood, that we were below what we expected with wages for this year so far.
Let me get into the details on that, Diane. I might not be able to get you an answer tonight. I don't have all that pulled up here.
That's okay.
And I can get you an answer on that. It might not be until Tuesday or after I get through the fire budget.
Perfectly fine. No problem. Thank you. And what do we do advertising and printing for Public Works? Just curious. What type of things do we do?
Yeah, some of that stuff's going to be for some educational material we're looking to do next year. With Storm Sewer, we might, we were kind of talking about some information about leaf collection, things like that. So, some educational material things come up. Herb, is there anything other specifics that I'm missing with the printing?
No, you hit it pretty well on the head, Randy. The only other thing is that we get our door hangers printed out of that also. So if you see violations, people putting stuff in the street or on the curb line that won't be picked up by trash or anything, we leave a door hanger on the door so they know how to get rid of it.
So we do that. The hauler doesn't do that.
They leave their door hanger for the trash part. But if someone puts like cut up debris from a tree limb and thinks the township's going to clean it up, that's when they call it in to us at Public Works. We go look at it, and if it's something that they drug out of their backyard, then we leave a door hanger for them or something like that, so they know how to get rid of it.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Diane, quick question about your question on Public Works. Can you show me what where you're looking at in terms of your numbers? Is that from the September 2020 financial statements I sent out the other week?
Yep, page 6, 2/3 of the way down the page. You have a paragraph narrative about salaries and benefits.
So this is the first and last time that I'll do this. But I sent this to all of you with knowing the impetus placed upon the financials for information for this meeting. And I did not give myself the time to be able to do a deep dive and review as I've been preparing for these budgets. So I hope to not do that in the future. So yeah, I'll just say that. A lot of times, like going forward too, you might find I won't give out the financials immediately yet, and that's because I haven't looked at them yet. But this one I'm going to try to dig into.
No hurry at all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I think we're ready to move on to Parks and Rec.
Okay. Renee, do you want to touch on anything with the salaries or anything, or you just want me to jump right down into the operating?
You're on mute, Renee.
Now, the same thing across the board for salaries. Parks and Recs are non-union employees, so this is a department that gets categorized into the administrative line items for expenses such as health insurance and FICA once we see that beginning and a part of the expenses. But again, nothing significant here in terms of changes. For Park and Rec, we are down in the salary. There was considered a part-time person last year, and we did not fill that open spot. So that's why you'll see a decrease.
Is that a position that will be filled in the future, or will it stay unfilled?
We are not proposing to fill it. That's why the budget is less for salaries. So we're not proposing to fill it this year.
Thank you.
Normally, like when a budget account doesn't have, like if we have a zero budget account for this year and last year, I usually like to just hide that. But if they have detail there in the expense column, I'll put that out there just so that we know that, you know, money's being expensed. So, I mean, that $131 that you see there might be, like, I'd have to look into the detail for that. But like I you know, it almost would be easier for the presentation to just hide that column. Not hide the column, but like present it from the, like this. If we don't have salaries and wages part-time budgeted, there's no need to have it in the next year budget, you know, if that makes sense. Unless, of course, we have plans to do that.
So the overtime pay, Parks and Rec, that's actually for events overtime. You know, when we do have these events on nights or weekends, sometimes it does require a public works employee or two. So we carry over about 15,000 each year to track that. Jump down to uniform, clothing, and expense. Those are really t-shirts, things like that for swim and gym staff, or you know, our summer playground staff workers and children. So they do get t-shirts for that program. The materials, we are at, Scott, the left-hand column on your screen, is that 2020 or is that 2021 right there?
That's 2020's budget.
Okay, I'm trying to make sure.
And then the 2020,
I'm looking at a different sheet.
Yeah, the 2020 actual is right to the right of it.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. So you can see we've really held spending this year, everybody, obviously for obvious reasons. In materials, we're proposing to take down about $5,000 and come in with about $2,500 next year. We did purchase some new park rules signs this year, which you'll see going up shortly, and some also additional dog waste stations, I believe. Where are we at here? Cultural recreation supplies were coming in about $2,000 less. We were able to buy some things this year, anticipating the playground program may still happen, which we obviously altered this year. So we do still have some materials left over. We were able to come in a little under budget this year because of things we'll be able to reuse next year. Small tools, minor equipment. We're proposing an additional 6 newsletter racks that we could put throughout the park system, and a 10x10 tent that we can use to help, you know, hand out supplemental information, brochures, things like that at our concerts and movies, or when we do go to, you know, a job fair or something, we have something that we can set up and hand out a lot of the material that it takes to get the word out for Parks and Rec programs, events, capital projects, studies, things like that. So professional services, this is where you see a big increase, obviously. $50,000 here is proposed for the Parks Recreation Trail Open Space Plan. And that's, again, that's an update to our 2009 plan. that was done by SSM. This is something we would likely do an RFP for and to solicit some, interest in this project. Where's Dam DEP compliance? We always carry $5,000 over. A lot of that's for permitting, inspections, things like that. The equipment rental line item is for band trailers, tents, some lights that that may be needed for events at night, so people can safely return to their vehicles. Contracted services, these are things like our porta potty rentals throughout the parks, at all the baseball fields. This is also for our summer camp transportation and field trips for the kids in the playground program. And this is also for individual program instructors, yoga, soccer, those sorts of things. Continuing ed, I believe Mike is presenting at the Pennsylvania Recreation Park Society event next March. Whether that's virtual or in person is yet to be determined, but we're going to carry $2,000 into next year to make sure he can get out there and give his presentation. Community event, we were able to take this down a little bit, guys, which is nice. That's because of things like with our movies. I believe we have a credit for movies that we paid for this year that we were unable to show because of COVID. This is also our concerts, our tree lighting ceremonies, the Allentown Band concerts we run for seniors at Springhouse Middle School, youth fishing derby, all the great events that Mike does a tremendous job running in our park system. This is what that line item supports. General government expense, we kept at $2,000. Facility usage fee, we kept at $5,000. We do rent some of the school district gyms at times, swimming gym, things like that. We're not quite sure we're going to be able to have swimming gym this year, so this number may come in well under budget. But in case we are able to have it, we obviously want to have some money in there to use. And the recruitment expense, we kept at $1,000 as well. So that's the Parks and Rec operating budget.
Thanks, Randy.
You got it.
Any questions for Randy on the Park and Rec operating budget?
Just a general question, Randy, for the study that you're wanting to do for the new plan for parks. Is that something that there might be grants out there available for?
So there is grants available through DCNR. If we were to write that, we would be not getting started probably until 2022. Which, if that's something the board would like us to entertain, I don't have a problem writing a grant for it, but I do think it's been 11 years, since this has been updated. We've listened to the board, and we understand you guys are looking for more of a vision for the parks. Mike and I have our vision. We've got our thoughts on it, but obviously, with the board's involvement, the public's involvement, we can update this plan and, kind of get everybody on the same page here. So that's one reason we were proposing it for next year, Diane. If the board would like us to go in a different direction, it's at the pleasure of the board, quite honestly.
Thank you. Yes. I mean, it's up to all the board members, of course, but I certainly would like to see a workshop for that, so we could all be brought up to speed with where we are and what we have, and maybe even talk about if it's necessary to go to that length to redo it. If it's between your comments and Mike's, it sounds like the one that was done in 2009 is fairly comprehensive.
It is, and it was actually a joint plan with North Whitehall Township. So while it looks at our system as a whole, I think we could dive into it a little bit deeper. I think there was a lot of cross connection with North Whitehall Township in this plan, and didn't specifically do a great job of looking at South Whitehall. It was kind of looking at north and south, and to see what partnership opportunities might be there. But I think with everything we've got going with the programming, the park system, it's growing. We're doing Kohler Ridge now. That's a new park that is obviously needs some vision as well. I do think the sooner we can do this, the better. You know, you want to do this every 10 years or so. So if we do go with the grant the grant avenue, by the time that's awarded, we're in, November of 2021. And by the time it gets the RFP out, I think this expense then would end up hitting in 2022.
I
That's
don't want to
assuming-
cover this
assuming
topic too
we
much, but why would this grant take so long? I remember we voted on the Vistas grant just a few months ago. It's already been awarded.
So that was in April. You guys voted in April on actually submitting the grant application. It wasn't awarded in April. It was awarded in just last month, I believe. So that was the fastest I've ever seen DCNR actually release their grants. They typically don't release them until late November. Sometimes I've seen it all the way into January or February, believe it or not. Depends on what's happening in Harrisburg with their budget. So it's a toss-up, to be honest with you. You might see it in October. Typically, it's right around Thanksgiving is when we hear about these grants. But we did hear early on the Vistas this year. You are correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay. All right,
That's
Scott.
all I think we have for Public Works and Parks and Recreation in terms of the detail. So at this time, what we're going to do is we're just going to look at the overview of the total budget, and then I'll highlight what we have in here for the current year, and what the outlook is, and then where the tough decisions that everybody has to make are. So hopefully my goal is, though, with how we've prepared the budget, there won't be many tough decisions to make. So as we've looked at revenues and expenses, this is what we're coming up with. For 2021, I'm expecting that we should have $15.1 million in revenue as shown on the screen. There we go. That should show up a little better for everybody. $15,148,218 in revenue. And then in terms of operating expense, I have $15,835,987. If it's eye-opening to see an operating loss, this is, expenses being more than revenue. This is not uncommon, as in many past years of the township, we have been there as well. So factored into that, we have some debt obligations. The two that you see at the top here, the general obligation note for capital and the 2018 borrowing, those are both, they have to do with the water fund. So those are both debt. That's debt that came over from the authority into the township. And then as you can see below, there's a transfer from the water fund for the debt paybacks right below that as well. You will also see, there we go. You will also see the building renovation payment. This is our estimated payment in 2021. We'll have 2 interest payments, and $315,000 is the total amount there. I have an estimated operating cash carry forward of $3,189,790 at the end of this year, which will give us a total unappropriated reserve of $1,995,521. That number is very high for us, the $3.189 million, because we have done a large, an incredible job of controlling spending during this year. And so we've cut back where we've been able to, and so that's why our total unappropriated reserve of 1.995 is there. We have a transfer to the capital fund, and I'll explain all of these things in detail. So hopefully a lot of questions that you have will be assuaged by the detail, and then we'll get in there as well. This next one is normally we have, or we have in the past. I don't know if it's a normal thing. I've only been here a couple of years for the budget, but there has been in the past a transfer to the Fiscal Stability Fund from the general fund in the amount of $50,000 for the Wares Dam improvements. This we have allocated in our Fiscal Stability Fund $150,000 total. So this contribution here of 50,000 would bring that up to 200,000. As you can see below, and I'll just highlight this, below we have $2,269,000 in our fiscal stability fund as well. Lastly, every year, this is another one. I don't know if this is normal, but I've seen it on the books for the last while. We make a donation to Satronia Ambulance Corporation for them to purchase a new ambulance each year. So that should leave us with a total unappropriated reserve, a remaining unappropriated reserve of $446,000. To give you perspective on that, last year we had budgeted for a total unappropriated reserve of $157,000. My budget this year is a 183% increase in terms of unappropriated budget. So that's the broad overview. If anybody has questions about the broad overview, I'm happy to answer those, but most of those questions probably are going to be answered in the details of each thing. So
can I just add the Satronia ambulance donation? That's actually a twofold donation. Back when, prior to the fire tax fund, there was the vehicle replacement program included a $30,000 contribution a year towards an ambulance, and then a $30,000 contribution to Satronia ambulance in addition to the $30,000. And the intent was that Satronia, that the ambulance vehicle fund would build up and release after 3 years, because I think it was $90-some thousand or a little bit more for an ambulance. The thought was to build that over 3 years. In the recent years, Satronia has asked us to release the whole $60,000 in a year, and that's what has traditionally been done. So it's at the pleasure of the board if they want to continue to fund a $30,000 ambulance fund and the donation to Satronia. Later on in the expenses, you will see that there's an expense for a $30,000 ambulance. And so again, so that's just kind of the history on the Satronia ambulance donation.
Renee, do the other townships that rely on Satronia for service give equal donations?
Everybody gives something a little bit different. We did not, I have not talked to Bob this year about what he has received from other municipalities, but each municipality gives something different. We can look at that. We can see what Scott can find out by next Tuesday if you want to look at that. But I believe when we looked at it before, not everybody gives, we were on the higher end.
Well, one of the reasons I ask is I know that Satronia also does a fund drive where they mail information to homes. I'm just curious about our donation as a township compared to others. So yeah, if you look into that, I think that'd be an interesting thing to consider and compare.
yeah, for sure.
I'll just share with the board too on Satronia ambulance. I don't know if it was last year. Actually, I think it was last year, Renee. Larry Wersch, when he was still with them, he came and gave a presentation and talked a little bit about the services he provides, that Satronia provides up and beyond the ambulance services to South Whitehall, and the partnerships they've had over the years. So I think that's why you'll see that our contributions to Satronia ambulance over the years have probably been higher than in other municipalities, because quite honestly, Satronia ambulance does do a lot of things outside of just the ambulance services for the township. So I just throw that out there. I'm not suggesting that we don't look into what other municipal donations are, but just keep in mind we might not be comparing apples to apples there, and just keep that in the back of your mind.
Hey, Scott?
Yes, sir.
Could you explain, so it looks like if I look at all the cash flow, the bottom line says there's a remaining unappropriated reserve of $446,000. And that would be like 3% of the budget. But down below, you have the asterisk footnote that there's a fiscal stability fund, I guess, of $2.3 million. So do we have, as a reserve, does the township have the total of both of those numbers, or?
So
Right.
as of today, we have a reserve of the 2.269 million amount.
Right.
In an ideal world, at the end of next year, that 2.269 plus the 446 would be the amount that we have.
Okay, so if you put it together, that reserve is like 17%.
If you add the unappropriated reserve, but there's years where we've had more money as the unappropriated reserve, where we have stuck over into the fiscal stability fund. But that fiscal stability fund was started, I want to say, about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yes.
And so that is just, again, a savings account. And the 2 million of that is invested into a CD. So our goal is never to have to touch it, but it's just a reserve in the event something would have to be
An emergency.
I would love to beef that up. I mean, I'd love to be sitting on 10, 20 million or something like that. And we wouldn't have worries.
There is a balance of sitting on that much money from a municipal perspective, because we don't want to get in a point. There have been some municipalities who've been forced to give money back to residents. So it's a balance of, your taxing rate and too much of a reserve. So again, and this is just on the general fund side, Mike, if you recall, there's other cash balances and unappropriated reserves for water, sewer, and refuse.
And Renee,
Right.
I think from the fiscal stability fund standpoint, historically, the reason that this amount is kept at, we had talked about a target amount, which would be so much, a percentage of our operating budget. I forget what that percentage was. And that's the number we want to stick with, not too much more and certainly not less, which would give us to put us in a position as a township that if we had any major emergencies or major issues, we would still be in a good operating position and not have an impact on our taxpayers. So that's why it's very, very important to maintain at least this level of a fiscal stability to ensure that, but not to get to the point that, to 10 million or 15 million or anything like that, because that, like Renee had said, that is actually too much money to carry over. It doesn't make sense from a balance standpoint from a municipal side. So, I will just kind of reiterate that this fiscal stability fund was set up and planned for with much discussion by previous boards to make sure that we would always be in a position from an operating standpoint in the case of any emergency.
I just had
the boards. Oh, sorry, Dan, go ahead.
I just had one question on the fiscal stability, Scott. So last year we were at 19%. The 5% difference, is that due to COVID or is it less?
No, the 5% difference was we had planned on some of that $1 million for our campus renovation.
Yeah, so in last year's budget on the main sheet, like 4 lines up from the fiscal stability item, you'll notice that it said transfer to general fund from fiscal stability for renovation only. So that $1 million came out of that 3.2. So we had a little bit added to the fiscal stability, but then the $1 million came out. So that's the main difference.
And then when does that $1 million go back in?
It could potentially go back when we refinance our renovation loan and debt.
And
that would be as early as next summer.
Next year.
Yeah, probably end of December of 2021.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. End of 2021.
2021. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is it a fair characterization to say that we're in a solid or strong fiscal position, even in light of COVID this year?
Yeah, I think, one of the things, and we haven't gotten to the revenues yet, I think, obviously we have an admission tax that brings us a significant revenue, which we had a significant hit with this year. However, there are other revenues that continue to fulfill some of the gap, particularly, realty transfer tax. Mortgage rates are low and the transfer taxes coming in are above budget. So that has helped. We did receive a grant from the county for COVID expenses. So that helped fill the gap in some of those expenses that we put out for COVID. So again, you know, real estate taxes are going to come in regardless, but you know, so we did do pretty good given the circumstance revenue wise of COVID.
It would seem then that the board's decision this summer, I believe it was a 3-2 decision to move forward with the Covered Bridge project, park project, even in light of COVID, is actually vindicated, given the strength of this budget this year.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And again, the Covered Bridge Park really did not come out of active taxpayer dollars. Most of that was funded through grant money.
All right,
Scott,
we're going to talk about revenues. Does that work?
Yeah, why don't you flip over to the revenues for 2021?
We're going to go to the revenues. So our revenues for 2021. I've got to zoom out.
I would say that as a relative position, we're more conservative on the budget side. When we look at real estate tax total, we receive a report on the assessed value of properties in the township. This is a pretty conservative number simply because we didn't increase the assessed value off of the report. You know, one could assume some additional assessed value, and I don't believe we did assume any assessed value increase. The real estate transfer tax, as you can see, we beat by budget by 277.1 so far.
And that was just at the end of September. So that's not factoring in what we brought in October or what we will bring in.
Wasn't a big part of that was that property that was sold from Coordinated Health?
A part of that was, but yeah, I mean, again, we, you know, when the real estate market is hot, this is typically a higher revenue line item.
It's like 0.5% on every house sold, something like that.
That's what we receive, yeah.
1%.
1%.
1%.
Yeah.
1%.
Business privilege, we're still seeing that come in dribs and drabs. So again, here we were pretty conservative. We decreased it a little bit for next year simply because of the impact of COVID on some of our businesses. That will be a change that we could potentially see next year.
I'm looking at some preliminary October numbers that I have right now. And like as it stands at the end of October, we're at 90% of the budgeted revenues for 2020. Just to give everyone an idea, 10% of our general fund operating budget comes from Dorney Park normally in a normal year. However, this year we received almost none of that comparatively. We received only 10% of their revenues. So when I look at the fact that we have 2 months left in the year and that we have 10% of our budget remaining in terms of budgeted revenues, I would say we're in a very good year despite the current circumstances. And especially because last year we had only budgeted for $15.9 million and we brought in over 17 million in revenue. So when we budget revenue, we budget really, really conservatively. And that's what, you know, I like to, when I'm wrong, I like to be wrong in the revenue direction, not wrong. You know, you've heard me say that at every budget meeting. I like to be wrong in that direction and be wrong in budgeting for more expense than hopefully there is. So, you know, when I'm looking at that, that's what I'd take into account if I were to say, you know, are we in a good position or not? When it comes to revenues, I think we're going to be okay for this year, and that's why my justification for the numbers for next year where they're at. So our cable TV tax to go, oh yeah, so to talk a little bit about the admission tax total, that's mostly from Dorney Park. This year we received $156,000 of that amount. And we're not really going to see more of that for this year. They closed in September. So
we did
it
talk to them though
Yep.
about their next year season already. They have cut their projections in half, and as we talked about it, you know, we felt that 800 was a good number. Their goal is to hopefully be in an operational scenario by July. So yeah, I think that hopefully again, we cut our revenue in half from that. So I think again, appropriate and reflective of what their goals are.
And we
If
don't
we-
know the, oh, go for it, Diane.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, we don't know the future, you know, with the news that came out earlier this week about a vaccine that seemed very promising. You know, that's something I even thought about too when looking at, you know, what number to use in terms of Dorney Park admission. It's wild that the events of the world factor into our township's budget, but they do.
Mhm. I just wanted to back up to the business privilege tax. So for 2021, I can remember in some of our finance meetings this year that we talked about the fact that that really does reflect typically the following year. So I appreciate that you've reduced that in light of that potential.
Yes, and I actually have some exciting news too with or a proposal for the finance part of the admin budget with the business privilege tax. Business privilege in our township is one of those revenues that you know, when I took a good look at revenues and looked at what we had in September and October and talked with Cheryl and talked with the rest of the staff about business privilege, the biggest thing I've come up with is that it seems like we have a potential here with business privilege that there's a consulting group that we've been in talks with that basically takes publicly available information like tax information from other taxing authorities and other areas where businesses report taxes, and then they'll line it up with where we have our business privilege records and what these I think Steve and some of the staff went on a conference. I wasn't invited, but not bitter about that. They went on this conference about business privilege tax. Actually, I'm going to a meeting next week about it. So with the Lehigh Tax Commission. So, but business privilege is one of those areas where I think we can really get more revenue than we've even gotten out of it. So even though it's a more conservative estimate and it's dropped, I think that we have a bright future in just that category.
I also think it's dependent on some of the businesses that go in the township and the warehouses and that kind of thing. There's potential opportunity there with the development there.
And it's a weird thing too with COVID. Like some businesses are going to take a hit, and then there's other businesses that like are going to pay more. You know, and I don't know where that line is. So I want to be safe, and that's why I think it's going to be only 2.145 or 2.15, close to there.
Great, thank you for the explanation.
For sure. Our cable TV tax, that number stays the same every year for the most part. We have a contract with the folks who are allowed to sell cable TV in our township. They pay us money every quarter. Earned income tax, I'm just estimating the same amount from last year to this year. So right now, as it stands, we are about $400,000 shy of the 2020 budget amount at the end of October. And I think that next year we may get to that same area for there. Local services tax, this one was a little bit of a surprise to me to see that the actual collected was smaller. And when I looked at the budget, it didn't seem that in previous years compared to actual that we were budgeting well for this. So Every year it seemed like we'd take the budget down, and then every year it would be farther down that we would receive. And this may be due in large part to the number of retirees that are in the township who are not paying the local services tax. Even though EIT is staying high, local services tax may come down because of that. So I think 675 is probably fairly conservative for there. The agreements line item, that has to do with, Renee, can you offer some input into that one?
I'm not quite sure why there's $5,000 in there. I'd have to look at the specific detail. Again, it's not a significant revenue. So I would have to see what's incorporated in that. I would move on, Scott. I'll look at it in a minute.
Yep. The grants and gifts total, this includes things like we get money for the police, like with DUI, expense grants and other various small items. So I wanted to once again, be conservative there. So I put $58,000 in there. Our licenses and permits, I have a little higher next year than this year, and that's because I think we have a lot of projects coming through the pipeline, and in discussions I've had with George and folks over in the permits department, it seems like we have higher activity there. So I'm budgeting for higher activity there as well. Interest income, we budget a little bit for. This number is going to be, I know that the actual in 2021 is probably going to be higher. Sorry, the actual in 2020 will be higher once we see, once we do the calculation for the interest on the building loan. So that's going to be way higher than $3,700. But once again, we don't make a ton off interest income. This is not something we try to plan on, but it helps and it adds to the bottom line. So we put it in here. Our other income, this includes things that have to do with discounts and penalties on taxes. Oh, sorry, not the other income line. Oh, I skipped ahead one. This includes things like traffic improvements. We charge $1 to the library every year for their use of our building, or for the lease. And as you can see that reflected in the $28,001 line item there. We also have some revenue that we expect to come in through various sales of fixed assets and other things like that. You'll notice the actual amount collected is much larger than what we budgeted, and Renee's she's gonna fill you guys in on what that is. That's the health insurance.
I just wanted to circle back.
I just don't know the explanation. Like, I don't know how to explain it.
The agreements total that you saw there, that is actually, it's a BP tax agreements revenue line item, and that our historic agreements with certain businesses in the township, it looks like there's 2 of them who have a BP tax agreement with a fixed amount that they pay us on an annual basis. So that is reflected in the agreements total, which the full line item there is a BP tax agreement total.
Renee, I'm sorry, why would that business privilege tax be separate from the other number?
There were some organizations, this predates me historically, who have had BP tax agreements with the township. And so that's why it goes there, because they get billed versus, it looks like they get general billings for that. So I would have to, again, that predates me. And so
we can get you that information. There were some special agreements put together from a legal standpoint with some of the businesses that Renee had mentioned. So, the amount of detail I can't give out now, but we can certainly get you that information to help you better understand why that's separate from the regular BPT tax.
Some of them may have been confidential agreements.
Absolutely.
Diane, is that more of a presentation issue? Like a presentation question too?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just that there were confidential agreements, and they're just tracked separately than BP tax that comes in on a tax return.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, part of me would almost rather have that in the business privilege section, but yeah, I get it.
The other income, I'm sorry, we were at the other income. So a large part of the other income is a surplus distribution. We currently, we participate in the Pennsylvania Municipal Health Insurance Co-op program, which is a self-funded co-op of over 250 municipalities in the state of PA that provide health insurance on to municipalities. And part of self-insurance is your premium includes your claim fund, your reinsurance, your stop loss insurance, administrative wages, or administrative costs. And in that, each year, based on the utilization of the township staff through health insurance, and so we're a year back. So what is received in 2020 is the basis of your claims utilization for 2019. Obviously, 100% utilization would mean that you really don't get that much of a surplus. South Whitehall came in at about an 87 to 89% utilization. So therefore, we do return a surplus of the premium paid comes back in a surplus to the township. So that is why there is other income in that line item.
But we don't budget that item each year because, you know, that's not something we try to bank on. That's not something we try to, you know.
We have no idea. Again, it's really based on claim utilization when you go to a reinsurance, when you go to stop loss insurance. So again, that's not a revenue, but again, it is a fabulous benefit of a self-funded cooperative and claims, and which quite honestly is why we have some wellness things that we focus on, you know, so hopefully our utilization. There's also a cross share amongst all the municipalities. So again, so somebody has a bad year. If we were in a fully insured plan and we had a bad year, we would either be, we would have significant premium increases. And that's something we don't see in this cooperative. So, so that's other revenues to date.
The last item down there that's discounts and penalties. So that's an offset to revenue when you get your real estate tax and you get the option that you can pay it early, which we love, but we have to report that properly. And so, you know, that number is going to be there. So the total amount of revenue projected, once again, is $15,148,218. So that's the general gist of, that's the overall of revenues. And once we're going to get to the next page, and here's all of the detail behind that. And I for the sake of time tonight, I'm not going to get into each line specifically unless there's unless folks have questions about them, or we focus on variances, just because there's so much here. And some of these, like certain types of revenues, like in the permits and whatnot, there's a lot of different types of things. And so, yeah. Does anyone have any questions about the overall? This is just the in-depth detail of what's coming from the that's summed up upon the totals page that was above.
Scott, are you gonna go through the ones that highlight the ones with variances, or
yeah, I can do that.
Well,
so,
but I think we already did.
Kind of hit. Yeah, we kind of hit those.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
your biggest one is Dorney Park. You know,
got it.
That's the bruiser.
I think, Scott, we can move on to the expenses.
Okay. So the overall, here's the overall view of the expenses. The overall view of the expenses, and this is by department. So this should show, this is for operating expenses, as you can see. So the overall view, you're going to see our legislative. So that's that includes the board, and that includes some contributions that the board makes. So the overall, there's no change from last year to this year in terms of that, but we'll get into the details of that, and we'll discuss some things that I think are important, and so we probably should talk about those. In terms of the executive, we have,
I was going to say, Scott, why don't you just jump to the details?
yeah, we'll just jump to the detail for this. It'll probably just be easier. So, yeah, we every year we as South Whitehall Township and you as the board more specifically vote on giving taxpayer funds to various organizations in that township that all of our residents benefit from. However, in recent years, there have been some requests that have been made that, in my opinion, without stepping on too many toes, sometimes they don't correspond to our township necessarily. And so one of those, and I've wondered about this, one of those is the Pocono Wildlife Rehab and Education Center, and that group is in Stroudsburg. And so we give South Whitehall taxpayer money to this group in Stroudsburg. And I think the rationale behind that, they send a letter to us and describe that if we send an animal to them, from our township, that's what happens. But I just wanted to, make that known. If you all, this is at your discussion, I'm not going to be part of that at all. But in terms of the money we give out, I just want to be prudent and careful as to the causes that the government should be spending money on. So yeah, I would love some board input here.
Scott, in the past, Renee, one second. In the past, we had talked about for donations, making sure that the people that request donations give us a written request. Did we get that for all of these ones that you have budgeted?
We have some of those. I would have to go back in my email and check. I put them in a certain folder and wait until budget time to get them out. And I put the amounts in, the details of the specific letters. I just looked at the amounts and put those in for the board. But I can dig those out.
Yeah, Scott, it might be helpful for the board, since this is new for Diane and for Mike and for Joe and for Matt. It may be helpful to give each of the board members any of those request letters, just so they can read them and better understand what the background of that organization is for a better decision-making process. Because historically, BOC team, what we've done is, for people who have requested support from the township, we've asked them to give a letter specifically like what their association is with the township, why they're requesting a certain amount of money and what that money goes towards, so that we can make an educated decision on whether or not to make that donation that year. So that might be helpful. And Renee, I apologize, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to make sure to talk a little bit about historically what we've done and how we've done it.
Did we pay out this year? I know with COVID, did things like the Clifford Park seniors and the Lehigh County and Citronia seniors, I don't know if those groups still met because of the restrictions on gatherings. Did we contribute to those anyway this year?
We did.
So if they didn't need to use it because they're, the groups didn't meet, is that something we need to look at?
Well, that should come in there. That honestly should be coming in their information. If they're requesting the same amount again this year, that's a question. I mean,
that
they
is a good
should be
question.
reporting out on it, and letting us know, yes, we still need the money and this is why, or no, we didn't meet last year and the money that you gave us will go into a reserve, something of that sort. But that's why we need that information from the business itself.
Yep. Let me see if I can get all that.
Thank you.
We'll circle back on that Tuesday.
Yep, Tuesday. Okay.
They may not have met, but they may have utilized that money to assist members of their senior group for something else. So we'll look into that.
Thank you.
Wages and salaries were explained, I think, by Renee. So those are kind of pretty straightforward in terms of, when you see the special allocation, that's the amount of money, once again, that is to be allocated to either water or sewer. Or
that one's the refuse.
Or that's the refuse allocation. Yep. Okay.
That is refuse because the allocation goes to water and sewer.
Right.
It reduces the general fund.
So this is the portion of the executive wages that are spent toward refuse. So that'll kind of be a little offset to the revenue. So the executive one honestly is kind of pretty straightforward there. Not a lot of changes that we have. Although Renee, can you explain a little bit of the attendance incentive? Just because this year is the only year that it should have, like, it looks like it has a big increase all across the board. And I want to make sure that everyone knows that that's directly tied to our previous sick leave policy and now our new one.
Yeah, so this year's the first year reflective of a higher attendance incentive. Previously, the township had provided non-union staff with 13 weeks of sick leave. That benefit was changed last year, and the attendance incentive had increased for no utilization of sick time or partial utilization of sick time.
That's right, 13 weeks, not 13 days.
Right. And what was the increase in the wages of 12,190? Under wages.
Yep, I'm doing some math.
As we discussed, there's a 2% wage increase across the board for non-union.
And that comes up to 2% there? I'm sorry, I don't have my calculator out.
Well, there are some other things in there. We have additional payments in there for board minutes for the executive assistant. So yeah, those things total that difference.
What is additional payments for board minutes?
Yeah, Tracy, our executive assistant is paid a stipend for board minutes, for her sets of board minutes.
And is that something new then, since?
No, that has been consistent over the years. I think it started 2 or 3 years ago. It started under the prior administration.
Yes.
Well, I'm just wondering, was it included in the wages then? I'm just asking why there's.
I added it to wages this year. I noticed it had not been included in wages in the past, so I included it.
Okay, so that was not paid in the past and you're making sure that it is.
No, I didn't say, I said it was not included in the wages. It was paid in the past. It is just in the budget this year differently.
Okay.
Because it was not budgeted additional prior, but it has been paid since the prior administration.
And with the change over to the Granicus software platform, will that change the way that we're going to be recording? It's going to be indexed and on the website. So obviously that there's going to be a shift there. Is that going to make any change to make it easier for that minute taking and minute transcribing to be done?
Well, there will still be minute taken. I mean, again, I would call it maybe perhaps a little bit less, but again, that doesn't change the actual board minute taking. So.
Thank you.
Moving into the finance department, you can see the wages and everything there. The big change here, I brought overtime pay down for next year, mostly entirely due to COVID. And so we have not been, we've been trying not to utilize overtime in the finance department and departments across the board more than we have to at all. So some groups, when there's like a water main break, like there was the other week, overtime happens, right? When we all know that. But when we can control it, that's what we're trying to do. So that's that one there. You also notice there's a contracted services line item in the finance department. And this was budgeted for $20,000 last year, and we have $10,000 this year. That's going to be, I have to reach out to this group. That money in that contracted services is going to be set aside for that business privilege consultant that will look at efficiencies in our BP process. So just so you're aware of that, because that's a little bit of a change. When it comes to tax collector, this is the person we pay, and we have collect our real estate tax for us. So I have no changes in that budget, in that part from this year to next year. In legal, we took a deep, long look at legal expenses. And so this is where we pay various different counsel to provide services for the township in a variety of different manners. And so this is what we have for legal expenses. Most of these are not controllable. Some of them we can plan for when we know certain things are, in the mix, and others we have to plan for there being certain things in the mix. And so I think that the numbers that we have here are adequate for those as well. HR, we have the human resources department, and you'll see here, what's going on there. The only big change is continuing education. We brought down a little bit. Not being able to travel doesn't allow us to go to certain conferences in that department. So there's a lot of online trainings that are available. So that's the biggest variance in the HR department. Now, admin, this is probably the biggest pot behind public works and the police.
Excuse me, Scott, before you get too far down that road, at the very top of that page is codification under legal.
Yes.
Can you explain that particular line item?
That's codification of our codification book. We send that in twice a year.
The ordinances.
For ordinances get codified into a numbering sequence. So that's what E-Codes 3 is. So that codification costs us money because it goes to E-Codes.
And you said twice a year?
Typically twice a year, yeah.
And there's nothing expended this year so far, so it just hasn't been filled out?
No, I believe there has been something expended this year. I'd have to look to see where it didn't get charged there, but I believe there has been expended this year.
Thank you.
The biggest piece in the admin portion, the biggest portion of the admin budget is our pension number. And as you can see, it came down a little bit from last year by about $132,000. We also expect health insurance to come down a little bit from 2020 as well, for about $105,000. And the other one as well, some other bigger changes, I guess the state pension reimbursement amount that we're going to get from the state is going to go up as well. And that's really good. That's really helpful.
I will say we conservatively budgeted there because this year it was $689,000. We decreased it a bit, not knowing statewide what they're going to do next year. So again, that's a pretty conservative number. We brought in more this year, but again, that's an offsetting number to our pension liability anyway.
We brought professional services down a little bit, as you'll notice, about $70,000. We also brought accounting and auditing services down $40,000. And that's because we are most of the way through one of the audits that we had contracted for with Irvine, but we have more to go as well. And so that's why the number is still at $110,000 there. That number encompasses several audits that are in the pipeline that we're working on. And that number in the future, in future years, when we're at the point where we're doing one audit a year, that 110 amount number won't be at 110.
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Does the admin professional services, who does that include? I just like.
Yeah.
Admin for the the professional services? Like who would that, like, what would that be? Would that
Yeah,
be?
let me get into the weeds here.
And you don't have to tell me now. I mean, you can tell me
Okay.
later. I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
I know that when we looked at it today, and all this week, this was one area that we had identified that we could take down, especially due to the amount that we hadn't spent in it. So we've, and I apologize for not knowing all of the details all at once. When I close my eyes anymore, I just see numbers. And
No need to apologize, Scott. It's no.
The professional services on admin, our newsletter publication came out of there, came out of the professional services so far. And some other Berkheimer, access to the Berkheimer system. So again, looking at what was put there and what in our experience, we decided to take it to the 50,000.
Awesome. I just really kind of wanted to get a feel for what services we were talking about, especially since we were dropping it to that level. So thank you.
And while we're in that category, right above it is public safety supplies for $10,000. What type of public safety?
That was in the event for, we had put that in there, I believe, last year for fire police and any anticipation of fire police needs.
That doesn't come out of the fire fund?
Not technically under, because of it being under the police department, we had put it under the general fund.
But we didn't
Okay.
have it in the police because it, was both police and fire, so we put it in admin.
And then a little bit above that, under postage, for admin, what would that be for?
Yeah, so postage in the general fund, we have a postage machine here in the office. And so when we replenish the postage for that, we like pay the post office a bunch of money up front, and then we have X amount of letters that we can stamp and on through that machine as well. I took that number down because upon further investigation of the water and sewer budgets, as I was looking back through those while preparing for this budget, I discovered that a lot of this, the way that Munis, our system is set up, is that we can't expense something in a current line item unless there's a budget amount for it. So the way that we process a lot of the postage costs here in the office is through one account initially, and then we move it to the water fund or the sewer fund in that account. And so the budgeted amount was for much more in the general fund than what we actually use. And so when the initial invoice was processed, it would come in through that manner and then go to the water and sewer. So when I looked at what the actual expense was for that account, it's not going to be anywhere near 40,000. So I spoke with the staff and they thought a good estimate in order to have, it's kind of akin to like a pooled cash account, but think for postage. It's easier for us to run it through the general fund and then reimburse whatever fund needs as we do it. So that's why I brought that number down. And I'm not sure why it was at 40 in years past, other than the for
I
that
would say,
specific
Scott, that it
budget.
was in years past because we didn't always have printing out through Gillespie either. So.
Mhm.
Great, thank you.
The other probably big ticket item in your admin is the insurance package, which is at 435.6 this year. We took anticipating a bit of an increase with premiums, simply because actually we've had some activity this year with car accidents and that type of stuff, and ensuring some more value. So again, we're anticipating, so that's probably the next big high ticket item is an insurance package that covers all of our insurances from liability insurance to car fleet insurance to police professional insurance falls into that category. So again, that's at the bottom of, sorry, the pages, looks like page 6 here. That is the large number at the bottom of there.
And that's for all of the township owned vehicles?
It's
Correct.
all, Yeah, it's all insurance that the township pays, whether it's liability, fleet, again, police professional, DNO, EPL, all of that falls into there.
So there's not a separate line item in the police budget for that?
Not for police professional insurance, no. It's all comes out of there.
On page 7, you'll notice that the big variances, the rest of them that are with admin have to do with laundry, uniform, and cleaning. You know, as I was digging into the details of that account too, we noticed that we don't do a lot of laundry for the admin, so we brought that one down quite a bit.
And you see a number in there because Public Works was using that account. So again, and nothing was hitting their account. So we did a flip of that this year to decrease that and you know, appropriately charge it to seat Public Works. Again, you know, in the scheme of things, it's irrelevant because it's all under the general fund. But again, from a budgeting perspective, it makes it easier.
IT costs are another big portion of our budget.
I can tell you, I mean, the large number in the IT, contracted IT and networking encompasses our contract with SSI, who does our outsourced IT networking. And included in that number, that's not just SSI, that is all of the IT licenses that we hold for any kind of software. Your website would come out of here. All police software comes out of there. Our Munis modules expenses come out of there. Our annual, you know, we have to produce 1095s, we have a works time software, we have, you know, electronic timekeeping software. So all of those license and renewals come out of that number. That came down a bit this year simply because we had shut off our AS400 machine the end of last year. And so we had incorporated over $20,000 in that line item for our outside AS400 consultant. So again, the majority of that came down because we no longer needed that consultant because that system has been turned off.
Engineering costs, we kind of kept the same across the board. And then when it comes to the police department, Glenn Dorney is up to bat.
Good evening. Yes, I think Renee will take care of the wages and those line items.
Yeah, wages here again is similar setup to Public Works, where we have police department folks who are non-union. And so they fall into that first category that you will see there of police. And then as you see further down, the larger number is actually police patrol union salary. So again, those are broken down into two different categories. That top half for the admin, those health insurance and pension expenses, they go over to the admin earlier numbers, those larger numbers. And then the police union numbers you will see further below are individualized into the police union category. I will say the one difference here in the police department is that they do have, well, it's not a higher number here, but differences in police are there is a longevity pay per their contractual obligation. So police are paid a longevity pay. And also in police, you will see, well, it's further down in the union side, but you will see that we do budget for holiday pay because of the overtime requirements on holiday pay in the police department because of the 24/7 service.
So how many non-union police do we have?
How many non-union police? We have 5.
I mean, in that number, is other support staff, or is this just actually police?
Well, we have 3 administrative police, we have a chief and 2 captains, and then we have 2 administrative assistants who are not police officers.
So that line item was the 2% raise. for
Police have a little bit of a different, no, well, that's a blended rate. Because police, we have traditionally done something a little bit different for the captains and the chief, because they pay into, while they are not union police officers, they have to pay into the Act 600 police plan. So they pay a portion of their salary into the police plan. Whereas the other staff do not.
Thank you.
If we want to go line by line, starting with canine supplies, we kept that. Last year we had $20,000 budgeted for that. We decreased it by $7,500 this year, which we feel comfortable doing so, to budget $12,500. That's anything related to the canine program, the equipment that they use, their food, vet expenses, things like that. We had budgeted originally last year a little bit to see if there was a possibility to expand the program, but we're not in a position to do that. So I feel pretty comfortable with the $12,500 coming forward. Next one, meal and food, we just kept that the same. We didn't really use any of it last year because we didn't really travel for any training. So we left that at $5,000, hopefully for the new year. If God help us that COVID goes away, we can actually start to do that again. Next line item is the uniform and clothing expense. We had $40,000 budgeted last year. We increased it slightly this year to $50,000, just due to the fact that we switched vendors again back to the original vendor that used to be Red the Tailor, and he is now back in doing the custom uniforms. One thing that we found last year with Hope uniforms, which was off the shelf, that anybody can buy, and it did not hold up very well at all. And the price of the uniforms from Hope Uniforms / Patriot is a much better quality, but the price is a little bit higher typically than what we had before with Star Uniform. So we increased that slightly, and also knowing that we are down 2 positions currently to hire, it's going to be a substantial cost to outfit those 2 new officers to get them in uniform. So we went to $50,000 on that one. General government expense or supplies, we lowered that just by $500. We had $15,500 last year. Last year, my screen just jumped on me, so I apologize for that. I'll go back to my paper. Went to $15,000 on that. It's pretty much all the things that we do day to day that we buy. If you see, we didn't spend a whole lot of it this year. You'll see there's a lot remaining in a lot of these just due to the fact of COVID. What we did, and we really, when we talked about really holding on spending, we really did that this year. And a lot of what we typically would have bought with the hand sanitizers, the disinfectants, that was all purchased out of a separate account and reimbursed through the COVID issue that we're facing this year. So that's going to be something, like I said, hopefully we won't have COVID next year, but those are the things that we buy on a regular basis anyway. And that goes back to nameplates for uniforms, some different things that we carry on a regular day basis. Small tools, minor equipment. Last year we had $30,000 budgeted for. We dropped that down by $5,000 to $2,500 or $25,000. I mean, so we have that. That was a $5,000 savings. We feel as if with some of the bikes, we buy bikes out of that, some other equipment that's not cars or anything by any means, but there's a lot of different things that we use, or handcuffs, things like that that have to be replaced on a regular basis every now and then. So we dropped that by $25,000. Some new technology out there as well that we're looking into that will increase officer safety as well as the safety of the public. One of those being the Bolo wrap. I don't know if anybody has seen those yet. It is a less lethal tool that allows officers, and some of this comes back to the criticism that the Philadelphia police officers are facing now with shooting of the attacker with the knife, that when he came at them, they didn't have less lethal tools and taser or anything else. So this is a device that actually has the ability to shoot out a long Kevlar it's kind of like a rope, and it has barbs on each side, and it's kind of like Spider-Man. It goes around and it hits the individual and it wraps them up to the point where they can't really move. It will keep their arms contained down if their arms are down when you shoot it at them, or it'll wrap around their legs and it will prevent them from moving and having a whole lot of movement to give you an opportunity to either move, get cover, do something different. So it's new technology that's out there. I'm not 100% sold on it yet, but I am looking at it for the future to try to help kind of minimize our liability and really increase officer safety. Professional services, we kept that the same. That's something that's pretty routine across the board of what we do. That it's kind of one of those things that just kind of stays steady every year. Testing fees, we're looking at doing promotional testing again coming up, and that's on average anywhere between $3,000 to $5,000, depending on what venue or what. Usually PA Chiefs comes in and does that for us. So we have that in the line. We didn't use any of that last year. We didn't test last year, so it's on par to go forward. We have nothing in telephone charges, internet fees, equipment, vehicle lease. And next thing would be radio maintenance equipment maintenance. Drop that about $2,500. With a lot of the new radios that we have, we don't have many issues with them. So we kept that at $2,500 to keep that in the budget and have it available to us if need be. Travel, we left that at $5,000. Like I said, hopefully we'll have some trainings that you can actually travel again to. There's some valuable things out there. Explorer Post, we left that at, or we actually dropped that by $1,000. We went from $1,500 to $1,000. Get back to trying to go off the paper and the screen. So criminal investigations expense, we left that at $5,000. That's typically the type of things that we use, whether it be to process scenes. There's a lot of data that we use out of there. Whenever we do a cell phone dump or track somebody via phone or do a lot of investigations, we have to pay for that. So if we, we call it ping a phone. If we're looking to try to find somebody via their phone location on their GPS, we have to pay for that typically. So we left that at $5,000. We pretty much spend that just about every year on average. The next one is the MERT expense, and you'll see a pretty drastic increase on this one from $5,000 to $20,000. And the reason behind that is the fact that we are looking at, we have to outfit the officers with brand new vests, and they have to do that every 5 years. And the cost of those vests are about between $2,000 and $2,500 a piece, as well as their rifles are pretty much at end of life, and we're looking at replacing those for next year, and that's somewhat of a substantial cost. So we're pretty confident $20,000 should do that. Let's see here. The next one that I believe there was a slight discrepancy in the number here. Just I think we went by the last one, I guess, when I think Scott, when you transferred it over, if I can find it, the DUI grant expense, you have $90,000 in here. Actually, this coming year, it's a 2-year grant it's a $432,000 grant that we're getting. So we split it up. The first year would be $216,183.60. Although it looks like a big number, the good part of that is it's money in, money out. It's not actually taxpayer dollars. So it's actually money that comes into the budget that we spend, and we reimburse. We're the fiduciary department for all of Lehigh County. So every municipal agency outside of the state police in Lehigh County that participates in the DUI program, they actually submit their billing to us, and then we pay that department to pay their wages. So that's a big number, but it doesn't come out of taxpayer dollars. So we're one of the most active DUI teams in the state. So we've received awards in the past for that. Sweep expense, we kept that at about $1,000. And that is essentially the new ordinance that you guys signed in with, the noise ordinance, things like that. Some of the things that we're able to do out there that we can cite for noise or different violations. We just had the ticket books printed up last week, so we have those in. So now we're able to go out and actually issue citations for some of those violations. Maintenance, service, and repairs, we kept that at about $3,000, which is typically what we do every year. Due subscription books, we raised that $1,000 to $7,000 just because the price of subscriptions and memberships have gone up. And also one of the things that I've done is to make sure that all of the command staff is a member of the professional organization of the International Association of Chiefs of Police and the Pennsylvania Chiefs Association, which is helps liability wise and also keeps them have access to any of the cutting edge technology, policies, things like that, that we can always stay on top of things. So next one is contracted services. We went from 10,500 to 12,000. We had a slight increase with that with some of the contracts that we have. Let's see. Continuing education, we left that the same, and that's essentially for the officers have it in their bargaining agreement that they get reimbursed for college classes to go back and get to increase their education. So we've got several officers that are going back and continuing their education for master's degrees, and they get reimbursed. I believe it's up to $3,000. Training and expense, we have $50,000 in there, and I believe we were going to, I think, Scott, we talked about dropping that to 40.
Okay.
From the 50. I just want to make sure we had that. Yeah. And again, this year we had a very considerable cost savings with that, just due to the fact that a lot of classes were canceled due to COVID. But we were able to supplement with some online classes to make sure that our officers were trained in in-house training as well with our mandatory monthly training. General government expense, the $2,500, we left that the same. That's a pretty constant, steady every year. General government expenses, let me see, I'm sorry. Major machinery and equipment, we increased that slightly by about $8,000. Some of that is for to add bicycles to the fleet. They're rather expensive. It's anywhere between $1,500 to $2,000 per bike, and to outfit it properly. We have about a dozen officers. If you see them out in the neighborhoods, they're riding almost daily. There's times where we have 3 or 4 bikes out there, out in the neighborhoods, riding around. They ride the parks considerably. So we have a very big expense and price for that program, but it works very well, and the neighbors love it. Public relations expense, we left that at $20,000. That I think is very, very important to me, especially in the culture that we face today. There's a couple programs that we'd like to initiate and plan on getting into place this year. One of them being the Citizens Police Academy, to get out to our residents, to have the adults. We have it for the youth, which is a great program. I think many of you have come out and seen some of that. We'd like to do the advanced program this year, as well as the Citizens Academy. So that would cover the cost for that. Heroes and Helpers, we kept that at $2,000. We're actually in the process of working that out this year with a COVID-friendly plan. Rather difficult, but I think we have it in play. Project Lifesaver, we were able to drop it down about $3,000 to $5,000, because we do in fact get grant money as well for that. And we've been really working pretty diligently with getting people signed up and in play for that. So it's been working out very well. And National Night Out, we left that at the $1,500 that we typically do. That covers all the expenses that we do for that event. This past year, we did not do that because of COVID. Again, I feel like a broken record with COVID, but unfortunately, it is what it is. Recruitment expense, we dropped down from $15,000 to $10,000. That would be essentially if we had to send somebody to the Allentown Police Academy for training with one of the new hires. And when coming through the process now that we just did interviews a couple weeks ago, and hopefully Monday we'll be certifying our new civil service list. Many of the people toward the top of the list have Act 120 and are current police officers elsewhere, and or have just recently graduated. So I think we should be in a very, very good position that if we do in fact hire two new officers, one of them will probably have the academy, and we should be able to get them in and for that cost. Weapons and ammunition, we kept that the same at $75,000. That is kind of it's a necessary evil with the amount of training that we do. We just received more ammunition today, and essentially every time we do our qualifications, we are pretty thin with ammunition, so we do that 2 to 3 times a year with that purchasing. Medical physical expense, we keep that at $5,000. That's for we've sent some officers for different things with workman's comp issues, whether or not there's any kind of difference in opinion of doctors. So we have that in play. Then it looks like we're down into the wages again, Renee, if you want to pick up from there. Unless you want to just skip, I can go right to the overtime.
Renee, I think you're on mute.
Oops.
Ugh. That's I mean, again, the wages are the same. Again, here, the difference is these wages are for the patrol officer, union patrol officers. The special allocation here is reflective of school resource officers and the allocation back from them. And also here, like I said earlier, we do provide holiday pay in here, unlike all other categories of employees, simply because of the 24/7 nature of the police. That's an added expense over and above their annual salary. So, and again, here, the police do have longevity pay, which is different than anybody else. That's a contractual obligation. They receive $100 of bonus for every year worked up to 25. So they cap out at $2,500 for a longevity bonus. And that's on an annual basis.
Okay. And for overtime pay, we were able to drop our overtime considerably. I know I'm not allowed to use the cash carry forward, but terminology, but we were able to save money considerably this year. Now, granted, part of that was COVID, but the 12-hour schedule that we went to in the last 2 years has cut our overtime considerably. And I feel as if the $275,000 will adequately cover that, and it will allow us to do the proactive things that we're looking to do, as well as our community engagement process. The next would be court overtime. We dropped that from $30,000 to $20,000. And again, a lot of that comes back to the schedule, with knowing that the way the officers rotate, the magistrates work very well with us and schedule the officers' hearings for when they're working day shift. So there's minimal overtime based on court appearances. So that turned out pretty well. We were able to cut that by another $10,000. So just in overtime alone, we're talking about a $70,000 decrease compared to last year.
Just to jump in on 2 different categories in police that are different than other departments, you will see a comp time payout. Contractually, police officers are eligible for comp time, and we by their contract, we push out a mandate that they can't carry more than 120 hours forward. So every year there's a payout, a potential payout, if anybody has over 120. The other difference here, you will see a post-retirement health. Again, contractually, police officers are retired to a set dollar amount per month until they reach the age of 65.
Okay.
The last item there that I'll point out once again, I feel like I'm beating on that drum of Dorney Park again. You'll notice that the extra job pay, is I'm expecting that expense to be lower for next year.
Are you expecting that to be lower, Scott, because Dorney won't be open the entire time, or okay, just based on timing of opening, not based. Okay.
Yeah. Correct. Yes. Also, Chief Dorney, can you? I'm going to switch quick to the capital portion of the budget so that you can speak really briefly about your needs there.
Absolutely. For capital this year, the only thing we're asking for is 3 additional police cars, which essentially works out with our our fleet, that we're able to keep our cars in better shape, they last longer, and replaces some that need to be taken out of service. We've got several cars out there with in excess of 100,000 miles on it, and they're just at this point nickeling and diming us. So if this this essentially cuts in half what we asked for last year. If we get the 3 additional cars, that will put us on a good track to keep a fairly decent fleet maintenance plan in place.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that also incorporates the cameras in the car, the MDTs, and the radios that go in those cars. So I have to look at what page you're on there, Scott, but.
Yep.
So Glenn, that's a fully equipped police
Fully
vehicle, fully,
Everything.
out with all the labeling and letters and.
Yep, that's striped. That's everything installed on it. The only thing that we did not put on like we did in the past with these cars is the license plate readers. We're in a position that we don't need them on all the cars. And also we've got some cars that we're taking out of service that we can take those LPRs off of those cars and put them on the new cars. So we'll be repurposing some of that.
Awesome. So Glenn, did you, just a quick question for you. And you probably did account for it, but with all of the extra work that our community liaison, officers Jason Grozer and Steve Brown, all the amazing work they've been doing and extra efforts for any of the different types of events or, handouts, different things that they do, has any of that, you included all that in the budget as well? I want to make sure that we have that covered.
Yeah, that's the $20,000, the public relations expense.
Okay.
Jason and Steve use that. That's kind of, I hate to say their account, but we use that for a lot of the initiatives that they do.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, I just wanted to make sure because I can only see that getting to be more active, not less active, especially as things go along. And
definitely the plan, yes.
Yep, excellent, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Chief Dorney from the board on his expense and capital budget review?
I just had a question back to the bottom of the first page of the police budget for the MERT expense. That was to outfit patrol officers?
No, we have 4 officers, all 4 sergeants that are assigned to the Lehigh County Municipal Emergency Response Team, which is the SWAT team for the Lehigh County. And they have specialized training and equipment that's outside of the realm of the average police officer. So that's why a typical vest for an officer that wears it on the street, which will essentially stop a handgun round, is about $700 to $800, whereas the vests that they wear, if you see the big tack vests that have all the stuff on them, they average about $2,200 depending on what vendor you go with and which one. So we average for about between $2,000 and $2,500 per vest.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Is everybody all right with a quick break before we make the final push?
Yep, that's fine, Scott. We can take a 5-minute break and meet back here at 8:35. So we'll adjourn until 8:35. All right, everybody. Got a lot of people still not on their screens. I want to make sure everybody's here. All right, is everybody all here? Oh, wait, I see if Matt's joined us yet. Matt's there?
I'm here. I'm here. I just don't have my camera on.
Great. Matt, Mike, Diane's here. Joe's here. I think we're good to go. All right, Scott.
All right. So moving down the list. Fire safety, all of this budget moved over to the fire fund. Just FYI. Next up, we have, this is that ambulance contribution, the one Renee was speaking of right here in contribution. And then we have emergency management, which didn't change much from year to year, so there's not a ton to speak of there. We've been through the public works section. We saw Parks and Rec. The last section we have is our community development section. And so you can take a look at the numbers that we have here for the budget, and you can see what we spend the most on in the department. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask those. George Kinney is on the call and he's ready and willing.
Yeah, so I mean, just generally for the new commission members, yeah, we run pretty lean, as you can see. So if you take our wages and whatnot, we operate on about 150,000 a year. You know, from a revenue standpoint, I think you saw we bring in a little more than 100 a year. So we run relatively flat from an agency standpoint. The three line items to maybe focus on are the three where we are suggesting a reduction, that being consulting, travel, and subscriptions. Probably the largest subtraction is the consulting services. You know, we feel at this point we're far enough along with the comp plan that we can kind of bring that number down a bit. And those are funds that would go to primarily the consultants that are helping us with the comp plan. There's also some other consulting assistance in there that's kind of minor in nature. Generally, and I just wanted to remind the commission, obviously, you know, on a larger development or on a development of any significance, really, we do collect escrow. So most of the fees that would go back to third-party reviews are charged to that escrow. So again, there's no tax money involved, no township money involved in any of those fees and expenditures. And I would also quickly mention that, you know, as the budget gets reviewed, we typically do follow that up with a fee schedule adjustment. So there is a township fee schedule that's been circulated to the department heads for consideration of any fee increases, decreases, what have you. And that'll come to you shortly after the budget is approved. So, you know, with that, I'm happy to answer really any questions that you might have on it.
Hey, George. George.
Yes.
It's Tori. And I think you said this, and I apologize. I see that you have nothing in for the professional services. Oh, or was that shifted down to the consulting services for anything that we would need? That okay? I answered my own question. Forget it.
Yeah, we've never really had anything in there.
Yep, got it.
George, I just had a question on wages. So there's a reduction in wages. Did we lose an employee in that department?
No, we didn't. We did not budget for additional interns this year.
Okay.
So yeah, our interns, I think primarily because of COVID, it kind of fallen off this year. So we're not expecting a big uptick in that next year either.
Okay. And then for the sweep expense, what part does community development play in that? Is that where our main?
Yeah, so Tom Harper in our office, he's the primary sweep guy, if you will. So he's developing the ordinances. He's obviously working with Commissioner Chief Dorney on how those are rolled out and laid out, but he's the architect of that. So there are some outside expenses typically involved with that. They're relatively minor normally, but he is on occasion he needs some either materials or some assistance that costs a few dollars here and there.
But it's not the implementation of the plan, it's the preparation of the ordinances.
Yeah, primarily, yes, correct, Diane.
Thank you.
Well, I did want to add, for the benefit of the commission too, is that, this is my third budget session, and the first two were obviously in person, and I always bring a big bag of candy to so you didn't get the benefit of that, but I'll make sure next year that that returns.
Yes, you do. And you don't bring little pieces either. You bring full size.
Full size candy bars. Yes, exactly.
No mess around, George.
I had one other question. Sorry, George. The inspections and permits for residential, what is that?
So sometimes there are some inspection services we provide outside of escrow. Typically, they're just to kind of help somebody if they're in a pinch or a pickle or something, and we eat a little bit of that. But if it can be billed back to escrow, we obviously do that. But there are unique circumstances where sometimes escrow isn't in place.
Thank you.
That sums up the detailed portion of the entire budget. I'd just like to encourage everybody, if you have other further questions, think of those and bring those hopefully to the wrap-up meeting on Tuesday.
I would also say if you have any other questions in the interim before Tuesday, please email them to the full board, and so that we can, hopefully have those answers by Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
And procedurally, just as a, for my fellow BOC team members, we go through this whole process and have the presentation, and it is between each workshop period. If you have the questions, definitely, even if it seems like a little question, just bring it up. It might be the same question other people have, and email it to the full group, and we'll get those answers and make sure that we get it all into a good workable form for our final meeting, so that we have something that is truly functional. Okay.
Well, something that I can just say this now because I know it's a question that I'm going to have next week. You mentioned that we received COVID grant. I know that we had tracked expenses in the earlier part of the spring, and then I don't think we did much more of that. But if we could maybe get something together for that and explain to us how that gets dispersed to the different agencies in the township that had expenses due to COVID, I would like to see a breakdown of that. I think that would be helpful.
That's not the same grant, Diane. This grant was for the municipality in and of itself, and any expenses that we had, not the PEMA, not necessarily PEMA expenses, but expenses or projects that we might not have done as a result of COVID. And so it was completed, the county issued that on a per capita basis. So South Whitehall was entitled to $325,000 some odd dollars. And so what we did is we submitted over $325,000 in expenses based on the grant eligibility. And so we were granted, the goal of the county was to fulfill the township's requirements and give that back. So part of that I justified was that we lost revenue because of Dorney Park. So that's not money for us to give out to anybody. That's money for us.
Okay.
And that's different then that PEMA money where we tracked expenses for like hand sanitizer and stuff like that, that could be being reimbursed separately. So again, this is just, it was a per capita grant that the state gave to and the county was awarded it. And the county had to decide how to disperse that money. And so they went on the per capita, and that was our portion of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Scott.
All right, lastly, we have, this is the breakdown of the estimated cash amount at the end of the year of 3.189 million. This is just showing activity that has occurred in the current period that at the 9/30 bank statement would not have been reflected at the time, as well as an estimate of the expenses that we, will have from now until New Year's Eve. So that's just there.
All right.
Great, thank you.
So, Renee, do you want to just touch briefly about the plans for the next workshop meeting, what that will include, and the steps moving forward?
Yeah. So next Tuesday will be our wrap up in the budget. We will answer, we have to get with the contributions, and we'll try and get that out before Tuesday, the contribution requests that were made. We have a few questions about the donation to Citronia ambulance.
We'll be doing fire.
I'm sorry, what was that?
We'll do fire on Tuesday as well.
Yes. Thank you for your patience. We had some unfortunate situations with the not the fire fund in itself, but our personnel. And so we've extended that because he would like to participate in that conversation with the fire fund. I also would, so we will wrap up every fund, and you will, we will wrap up every fund. There are some things, we noticed some transposition in numbers in water and sewer again, so we will finalize all of those numbers because the first reading of the budget would be on Wednesday. So Tuesday night, we will do the fire fund. If you have any questions, I would ask that you email them to us in the meantime so that we can address everything. We will do the fire fund. We will give you all of the final sheets on the other funds, the contributions.
And what I'm going to put together for that final meeting too, there's going to be a sheet in the, I'll just try to share this portion of the screen.
There's a large sheet that has every fund summarized. I believe that's the sheet you're going to, Scott, right?
Yep, right there. So it'll look like this. And that's what I'm going to put together for everybody so that we have, this is last year's. So that we have that. So we're getting the binders. We're going to hopefully get you all physical copies so that you can look through these and get those out to department heads and whatnot. And so
just so you know, this process is no different than any prior year. Every time we had a budget workshop, you got the relevant data the night of that meeting. And so we will build your binders with the final data. You can keep your obviously draft ones or anything you took your notes on, but we will build the binders with the absolute final budget data.
And Renee, will you be able then to drop off those binders on, you said on Tuesday, like, to everybody?
Well, we'll do it after Tuesday night in case there's any change. I mean, well, if you want your blank bind, I mean, it doesn't matter to us, but everything will be finalized because we have to go over contributions Tuesday night.
Gotcha.
And we'll go over the open space. And so, I would, unless somebody else wants otherwise, we would do the binders after Tuesday night with the absolute final. You all have your worksheets that you've had at the meetings. So unless somebody objects to that, we'll do the binders after Tuesday night when the finals are done.
That makes sense. And then but you'll have the revised sheets available for the Tuesday meeting.
Correct.
Yep, great. Thank you.
And I just have to follow up to that, having attended the budget workshops last year, I remember Steve had, an Excel spreadsheet up on the screen, and he was able to manipulate the numbers based on the feedback from the board. Is that what the plan is for Tuesday?
Well, that's what we were doing now. If we did that throughout this time, that's what the spreadsheets were that Scott had.
But I just don't have that on the screen. I have shared. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, we have the same thing, but again, the staff has put forward the operating expenses based on experience. So our anticipation would not be that there's any changes to that. I mean, obviously the contributions there'll be changes to, but we wouldn't anticipate any significant changes to any other line item.
Like, Diana, if you have something that you have changed or you think needs to be changed, that's why we keep saying, if there's a question by a board member, make sure you put it in, put it out to the full board, and we can look at those numbers during, subsequent workshops. So if you have something that you're looking to be modified, we can, and you send it out to the group, we can work with that number or talk about that, at the next workshop.
Right, we're still waiting for some information to be provided to us, but I'm asking if we're going to have it in real time with that spreadsheet so that, we can see.
For the spreadsheet for like the contribution changes or anything like that? Yeah, you'll see that.
So that we can all watch, if there's
I'll set that up on Tuesday. Yep.
Yeah, I found that to be very helpful last year when it was presented that way.
Well, that's exactly what the spreadsheets that Scott was going through expenses, that's what it does. It as he changes that, it changes the whole, like the sheet that you're seeing in front of you. It all ties to the expenses and the revenue. As they change, it does. Again, I don't think we changed any significant numbers because, again, our goal is not to have to do anything because of the planning and the work that goes into the budget by the time it gets here. But we will do that for the contributions, so you will see the change immediately in contributions. And again, whatever you decide to do with the open space as a board, you would see that change real time.
Thank you.
Hey, Diane, so I did bring up the September 2020 financials. The number I was confused about, this is why I said I didn't think I was looking at the same thing. For the public works wages, that comparison that was put in the narrative in the front talks about year-over-year expenses. Is that what your question is about?
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of the year-over-year, like why, this year's wages expenses are higher than last year, I think a lot of that has to do with contractual, what we agreed with the Public Works Union in terms of wages and salaries. But I wouldn't be so concerned about that, given that the total wages amount, like on page 16 of the financials, the total wages amount that you're able to look at is only 59% of the total yearly budget at the end of September. So,
okay.
Diane,
that was over, I'd be more concerned if that was over 75%.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Just as a matter of information too, if we have somebody who retires, they will receive higher payouts of accrued PTO. So that will go above, so you will increase your wages dependent on, I know we had 2 payouts of retirees for their accrued paid time off, which they're entitled to upon their retirement. So,
okay.
So all of that factors into that number. And again, that's a year-over-year comparison. We're looking at, at a 25, 50, 75, and 100% of budget in a current year.
Okay, thank you.
Quarters.
Yeah, and that also another thing too is that page that we have that we do all of the variances for. One of the many projects is you can see the whiteboard behind me. One of the many projects I have listed on the whiteboard. In that list, I want to revisit just how financial information is presented, because I think there's some variances in that list that are just if you look at page 4, and this is not for the budget meeting, so anybody feel free to tell me to stop talking, but you know, if you look at all the, like on page 4, you know, the variances month to date through year, year to date through year, a lot of that's really confusing and can be confusing. It's just a lot of info at once. And I'd love to revisit that as like, okay, what would be the most efficient and effective way of doing that? Because this way of reporting it was well before my time. And like, sometimes I look at this and I don't even know what to look at. You know, and I'm an accountant, so I figured out eventually, but you know, when I look at, there's, you know, 10 different columns of numbers and I'm like, which one goes where? And so yeah, that's just an aside note.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Renee, Scott, anything else?
That is it.
All right. Anything else from the board on the presentation tonight? Obviously, lots to think about, and again, please get any of your questions, you know, email them out to the full team, and we can get to work on those prior to the next workshop meeting. All right. We have no new business or discussion items. We do have the opportunity for courtesy of the floor. Is there anybody on the call tonight who would wish to have courtesy on the floor? I'm not hearing anything or seeing anything. That being said, we have no executive session. Can I have a motion this evening to adjourn?
Commissioner Morgan, I think the chat box is disabled if there's somebody that's trying to get through. I can't click on it.
Well, we only have 2 people on, unless everybody's muted. So
I don't see anything in the chat currently.
no, unless anybody, I'll leave it open for another second here. All right. Can I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Kelly. Can I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mobilio. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mike, aye. Joe, aye. Give me a thumbs up.
Aye.
Excellent. All those ayes. Great job, staff. Thank you very much for all your hard work put into this. Much appreciated. Again, as always, for everything that you do. And we will talk again soon. Have a lovely evening, everybody.